that would appeal us to begin a homily. And I thought the Irish tradition, how they celebrate Christmas. I don't know how many of you are from Ireland here. Please put up your hands. A few people, yeah. The Irish tradition goes this way, because on the Christmas Eve, they light a candle or a lamp and they keep it on a window facing the street. The idea is that night Mary and Joseph will be passing that way. If they do not find any place, that particular house is open to them to give birth to Christ. Another idea is that if there is a stranger who does not find a place to rest that night, the candle indicates they can walk in and take rest. And who has to light the candle? The youngest in the family must light the candle. And who has to blow off the candle when they are about to go to sleep? The one who has name Mary or Marie. So that is the tradition. And then, once all the celebration at night, taking food and little bit of drinks and enjoyment is over, then what they would do, they would set a table and put bread and a jar of milk and some raisins and keep the door unlocked or unlatched, meaning to say that night those people who are hungry can freely come in and have food, indicating celebration of Christmas in Irish tradition. Today we have read the first reading, dear friends, coming from Isaiah chapter 9, where Isaiah shouts, people who were walking in darkness have seen a great light. Those people who were living in a land with deep darkness, there the light has shone. You have multiplied our nation. You have given increase to our joy. And those people rejoice as it were. They are sharing the time and the spoils of the war. And then they rejoice as it were it is harvest time. Dear friends, Christmas is a time for rejoicing. Now when we go back to that historical context of the birth of Christ, we have heard in the gospel passage, Cezar Augustus obliged all the people, and it is said the whole world, because that time all roads were leading to Rome. So Romans were the conquerors and Cezar Augustus was the greatest king. He ordered obligatory census. That means everyone who is born in their own town must be registered. What was the story behind? To collect taxes. I think all governments do nowadays, right? To collect taxes. You know, some people say that only thing that we do not pay is the air which we breathe. We don't pay taxes for that. For all other things we keep on paying taxes. And that was the idea behind this great king Cezar Augustus, that he wanted to collect as much taxes as possible. And that is why Mary and Joseph, because they were from the place of Bethlehem, they walked from Nazareth of Galilee to Bethlehem to be registered. And now, Cezar Augustus, during that time, there was a kind of festival that was going on in Rome and in Roman towns that was called Saturnalia. Remember that word. Saturnalia is a celebration of lawlessness. That means no law. Those 7 days, from 17th to 24th, there would not be any law. Police will not be available, courts will be shut, soldiers will not wander, and people were given a free hand to live lawlessly. And at the end, they will end that celebration humiliating a foreigner, an enemy of Romans, humiliate and then end the celebration. And that was a kind of lawlessness which was indicative of darkness during that time. And Christian missionaries and the tradition of the Catholic Church introduced Christmas during that time, showing that we have a great light coming down from heaven to enlighten the darkness around us. Now, Mary and Joseph, a question arises in our mind: why did they go to an inn and why couldn't they find a place? That is a question that really comes to our mind. Is it because that they did not want Joseph and Mary in the inn? It was not because of that, because if they had money to pay, Joseph was a carpenter, he was working, he had enough money to pay, but then there was no place in the inn because of Cezar Augustus' order that all should go and register their names, and people were flocking. That was an order by the king, and consequently Mary and Joseph couldn't find a place in the inn. Now, what was an inn? A sort of hotels or motels in the modern world. Now, the second question comes: why the stable? Now, today when we speak of hotels and motels, at the backyard, what do we find? What do we find? Garage. A parking lot. You will find a parking lot. And what is a stable? That was the parking lot for those animals and chariots, for camels and for horses and mules to park their animals. They did not have cars as we have today. They did not have vehicles as we have today. They had to park their animals. And Joseph creatively thought, well, if I do not find a place, this is an emergency. Medicos would not come. As we have today, there is an emergency, immediately you call 911 and immediately someone will come. But those days there wasn't that kind of facility. And what happened? Joseph thought creatively to make a space for Mary. Just imagine, Mary was just ready to give birth to Christ, and they made space in that stable. That is the light coming down from heaven. Cezar Augustus, with the biggest army possible at that time, Jesus, Son of God, born as the King, as we have heard, a child is born who is called the Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father. On his shoulder, a great responsibility of salvation. But then he did not have a big army at all. He did not have anything. But there was an army, hidden army. The shepherds who were in the field with their sheep, they saw the big host of angels crying aloud from above, "Glory to God in the highest, and peace to all those people of good will." Dear friends, today we have just 2 or 3 points to keep in our mind. One is to keep space for Jesus and Mary and Joseph in our hearts. That is, let our heart be in, that is the in, let us make space for Jesus. And second, those people who are walking in darkness have seen a great light, means that we must long to always walk in light. Light means joy, happiness. Christianity is not a sad religion. Christianity is a religion and faith experience of happiness and joy. And that's why when Christ comes, when he said, "I am the light of the world, I am the way," in John's Gospel, very specifically he says, he makes the way for us to happiness. He is the light to show us light. And that is why Jesus coming into this world helps us to understand the mystery of God. We do not have a God who punishes all the time. No. I do not agree with that kind of God. Our God is a Father who is concerned for his people no matter what type of sin we are in, but we, on our part, with all our poverty and misery and sinfulness, we try to make a place for God in our hearts. That is, we make a place for Jesus in our inn. That is the first thing. There was a man who never believed in Christmas stories. You know, there are people out there, it is difficult for them to convince, that God came down from heaven. We, in our faith experience, we believe that God can come down from heaven in the person of Christ to liberate us. But this man never believed. But then his wife was a very faithful Catholic, and she brought up her 3 children in Catholic faith. And on the eve of Christmas, they wanted to go to the church, and they asked the man, please accompany us, this is a good day, let us celebrate, let us go to the church. And the man said, I do not believe all those fairy tales, and therefore I don't want to go to the church. If I were to go to the church, it would be hypocritical on my part. Anyway, you go to the church, you have your devotion and celebration, I will wait for you until you come, and then we celebrate at home. Well, the woman and 3 children go to the church, and this man was at home, and it was winter, and it started snowing, and big flurries of snow comes down from above, and it was very cold. He warms himself at a fireplace, and at that moment something happens. There are thugs. It's a first thug and another sound on the window, and he thought someone must be making balls of snow and throwing at his window. And at one point he goes and sees nobody was there, but there were birds around, because all these birds were caught up in the snowstorm, and they had come down because of the heaviness of the snow. They were around his house, and he came out. He had pity on those birds, and at one point he said, I must do something for these birds. And then he opened the barn that was right next to his house. He wanted to shoo them into the barn, but these birds would not mind him. Then he went in and brought some bread and powdered the bread and made a trail through the bread, so that eating that bread they could go to the barn. They did not care. He was totally helpless. At one point he said to himself, most probably I look like a strange creature to these lovely birds. And at that moment he thought, if I were a bird like them, certainly they would have listened to me, and I could have led them to the barn. And at that moment, the church bells pealed, and he understood the meaning of Christmas. And he said, well, this is why God came and became man, in order to make us understand that he loves us. And then he fell on his knees, and he waited for his family to come to recognize Christ in his life. Therefore, dear friends, when we celebrate Christ, only 1 or 2 things we will keep in mind. One thing, that we will make space for Christ in our heart, because even though he is the Son of God, he was born like us, with all limitations, with all human conditions. He lived with us, he wanted us, he loved us. The second one, let us all try to live in light, the light of Christ, because light is joy, and that brings us happiness all the way. And the third one, since Christ is the way, he leads us to the Father's house. He showed us the way, showing, I am humble and gentle in heart, learn from me. Therefore, dear friends, let us ask the Lord during this Holy Eucharist to enlighten us, to become children of God, to welcome Jesus in our hearts, and share Christ in our daily dealings with others, so that the joy of Christ may spread and his kingdom may be established. Kindly rise, we profess.